I managed to convince a canteen lady years and years ago that the penguins you buy in the shop, these types of penguins, the green ones had a better taste. It's because it's the Irish green. Eventually I convinced her. She only ever handed me green ones. And yeah, that's how you go. Alright, I have to go, Charles. Frankie's getting more and more suspicious. In the old penguin suits. This is one of my favourites. And for the Christmas dinner, Chateau de Penguin 2001. Tastes like seal pea, but after 2 glasses you just don't care. What about this one? I love penguins with salad and chips. Who was like that? Terrible, wasn't it? Okay, let's get a bit serious now. Okay, that's all over now. Where does the word penguin come from? Actually, it's quite interesting. One theory was the Welsh word penguin, white head. Great auk, northern hemisphere, had a white head, and also the modern name for its close relative, the great auk, the razorbill. Penguin, most likely from the Latin penguis, which is in Spanish or Portuguese translated into pengui or penguis, means very fat. Thus, El Penguino, the fat bird, is the name, or was the name, for the great auk. And then, of course, when Europeans visited the southern hemisphere, they found other fat flightless birds, and with the extinction of the great auk, penguins stuck to penguins as they are today. And it appears everywhere. I've got so many examples I have to... So, a lot bigger, those fossilised ones that have recently been found. One thing, this poster will be upstairs, but just one thing to bring to mind, the limit for wing-propelled divers that can also fly. As you can see, top line is our penguins, and the bottom line is the northern hemisphere. Your great auk, of course, couldn't fly, roughly the same size as the Gen 2 penguin. The murre, or guillemot, is the largest of the auks and is on the limit of flight. And the little blue penguin from Australia and New Zealand is basically just on the verge. It could actually fly, but of course it's got solid bones and everything else, and there's a penguin, so it can't. But that's the limit, and then of course they go up in steady sizes, as you can see there. And in fact the lengths are here, and if you want the conversion to inches, 2.54 centimetres equals an inch. And I'll let you do the maths. Weights comparison. So we just mentioned auks and auklet. The smallest auklet were 90 grams, equivalent to a CD in weight, so very light. And the guillemot, or murre, weighing 1 kilogram, similar to a litre of milk, same size as the little blue penguin. And then, of course, the emperor penguin, the weight of my suitcase coming south, bringing all those books and bits and pieces. And I'm sure you all had the same problems as well. Interestingly enough, though, as you can see from this, the taxonomic relationship between penguins is closer to albatross and divers, or loons if you like to call them, no relation to auks at all, or not very near anyhow. And you can see straight away albatrosses come down to here, divers close, and then all the penguins here. So quite closely related to albatrosses and divers, funnily enough. So quite interesting really when you look at it like that. I'm not into taxidermy in a great way, but that is interesting because automatically you'd think that they were closely related to auks, and of course they're not. Highly specialised and adapted for their environment, as you can see there. Body streamlined for swimming and porpoising. They have a lower drag coefficient than any other body so far investigated, man, made, or occurring in nature. So super adapted for going through water. A chin strap, here's your chin strap here. A chin strap size penguin with a body diameter of 180 millimetres. It has the same drag moving through water as a coin with a diameter of just 15 millimetres. In other words, they really are super efficient. And I'm sure that any of you that saw penguins in the water yesterday, it's just amazing how fast they're out and back in again. And it's really hard to catch a picture like this when they're in mid-air. But it can be done. It can be done. Bones, solid and heavy, means less energy for diving purposes, and as you know, other birds have air cavities, obviously for lightness. Legs short and set far back to assist tail as rudder when swimming. Just note here, the knees of penguins are up here. Obviously you don't want to get cold knees when you're out in Antarctica when you get out of the water, so you have your knees well protected. That's why they waddle. And if you tie your ankles together and put a sack around them and start waddling, you'll find out why penguins waddle. So that's the way it is. Wings, heavily modified to make stiff, flat flippers. So they really are. They're very stiff, and they make the flying through the water much, much easier for their swimming purposes. And of course, like all birds, they have a preen gland just above the tail. Extremely important in penguins because, of course, they keep their plumage permanently oiled up, if you like, for waterproofness. And they do it, you'll see them turning over in the water, so you can see their belly when they're in the water. And they preen away using the oil gland, which obviously produces a lot of oil, so that they can protect their feathers. No easily defined feather tracks, as in other birds. Most birds have lots of feather tracks. There are, very definitely, I'll show you one that proves it, a picture that proves it in a short while. But basically, all the feathers are very stiff. I showed you this picture this morning, and I go back to the story I was saying this morning about these PhD students. 70 feathers to the square inch, approximately. But of course, they're really, really close together and very important. And basically, it's to help with stopping heat loss. Penguins have been noted to drop their body temperature when entering cold water. This biological event minimises the heat loss of the body. Again, very, very important. And this one is also quite interesting. The problem for penguins is that they get too hot. As you can see, they're normally in water, so the temperature is usually only down to minus 1.7 because the salt water, minus 1.8 basically is when it freezes. So they're quite happy to go in water cold enough down to that. When they're out on land breeding, they get a problem because they get too hot. You can see this. This is skin when normal. These are the flight feathers here. Then you've got the layer of blubber coming down the middle, and then you've got the blood vessels inside going through the blubber. The vessels, when they get hot, they ruffle their feathers to try and get cooler, and they dilate their blood vessels to try and get the heat away from the outside, because that's their biggest problem. And I'll show you pictures of penguins that you can see very easily are stressed because they're hot, because what they basically do is they try in every which way to try and cool down. An interesting adaptation, penguins' ability to change the shape of the lens in the eye, so they can actually change that lens shape so that when they're underwater they can see their prey much easier. As you know, when you look in to try and stab a fish with a spear, when you put it in, it bends automatically. But this ability does help them with their hunting abilities. And another one, I'm sure you've seen these sort of amazing pictures of emperor penguins and other penguins in water going up, and they come zooming up onto ice floes, and of course you're going to see them popping out of the water in the next couple of days. These streams of bubbles actually help them in streamlining and coming out of the water. They've done experiments, and in fact the Japanese with their shipbuilding at the moment are producing bubbles from the front of the ship coming down the side. It makes it smoother and then more efficient. So in fact it streamlines them and they're able to go through the water even faster. So this is actually deliberate. It's not just they're deliberately letting bubbles off through the feathers to streamline them more so that they can go through water easier. Another one, papillae. These little papillae here, so when they catch prey it's caught and goes on down. They don't lose it. This helps with that going down. This is my favourite adaptation, and if any of you are falling to sleep, I'm going to deal with it now, because after this you'll feel quite squeamish. The stomach lining. This is an amazing adaptation. This is a chin strap. I've seen chin straps doing it. I've seen Adelis doing it. You know that krill, of course, has to live in cold water, and it basically needs a form of antifreeze to keep it going in the water. Otherwise, the krill would freeze up. This antifreeze type liquid is toxic, and to get rid of the toxicity, they've obviously got to adapt in some way to deal with it. Penguins are remarkably clever, and there's still not been much research done on it, but basically what they do is they store the toxins in the lining of the stomach, and then they literally cough up the lining of the stomach. Can you imagine if you're on a night on the tiles and you feel lousy, you come in and you get rid of your stomach lining and grow another one for the morning? Wouldn't you feel better? Well, this is what penguins can do with that, and it's just an amazing adaptation. So little work's been done on it as well. It's an open book for someone to actually study in more depth. Really, really fascinating. Molt. Now, as you know, all birds have to molt because they have wear on their feathers, and the lighter coloured feathers tend to wear more. That's the subject of another lecture. But the problem is you can't molt your feathers when you're in the water. So that's a limiting factor in relation to penguins. They have to come to shore once a year to molt. Now, the other seabirds I was talking about the other day, they can molt them bit by bit, but basically penguins lose all their feathers at once and grow a whole set of new ones. And for a penguin of this size, it takes about 3 weeks. So basically, what they do is they go out to sea, they fatten up, and then they come in and they basically settle down, and they sit on the side of the place and lose their feathers and grow the new ones over a period of 3 weeks. No food. Now, they do go and eat a little bit of ice, or they'll go and get a little sup of seawater or something, but basically they just have to suffer for the 3 weeks. Young birds, you can see this one's actually got down. Fine, that's going to lose its down, have its set of feathers, and away it goes. They say the temperatures of these birds goes up when they're doing it. They say it's like having a very bad dose of the flu. Now, I don't know of any penguins having the flu, but this is what they say. Basically, they feel lousy, and they're very vulnerable at this stage. They feel very sick, they act very sick. One of the big problems if you were going to go down to Antarctica at this time of the year or a small bit later, and you were going to land, if there's molting birds, everybody has to stay well clear, because basically they are very stressed out because of this. Oh, it's lost my voice. 1 second now. And then we'll continue. This is because I lectured to you this morning. Okay, that's better. A little bit of oil, you know what they say. They also have other abnormalities. This I'm looking forward to seeing this. If we go to Paradise Harbour, there is a Chilean base, González Videla, and we go very close to it. And they actually have quite a lot of these. They may have up to 4 or 5 of these. It's the term that it's actually called. Everybody calls it leucistic, which is incorrect. It's a brown form. It's just a deformity in the colour. It only happens, it's a genetic thing, and it only happens in the females. You can see, in fact, here's a correct looking Gentoo. You can see the white on the top of the head, and it's brown. All the black plumage is actually light brown, and as the season goes on, basically, it gets lighter and lighter and looks white. In fact, the Chileans call them blondies. So it's well worth looking. If we get there, and I'll point it out when we're doing the commentary anyhow, if I see any, but you might see a white penguin in the water. But it's a fascinating problem or abnormality, if you like. And again, look at this Gentoo here. You see he's lost his leg, obviously to something like a leopard seal, but they seem to survive very well. And you do occasionally see these penguins obviously having tangled with something like a leopard seal and looking at it in an awful state. But they seem to have remarkable recovery techniques and manage very, very well indeed. Maximum depths recorded by some penguins. Yellow-eyed, 34 metres. This is the little blue from Australia and New Zealand, 67. The ones we were looking at yesterday, Magellanic, 90 metres depth. Chin straps, just over 100 metres. African, 130 metres. The Adelie, 170 metres. Gentoo, 210. 323 for King, and Emperor, look at this, over half a kilometre below the surface. I mean, the pressures they have to deal with is totally amazing when you think about it. I'm not going to go through all these, but this is a list of all the penguins in the world, and you can see the latest described is in fact the Amsterdam penguin here. But you can see that actually those are all the penguins that exist in the world or have been described to this date. Just show you a couple of other ones. Yellow-eyed penguin, the New Zealand one here. And little blue penguin here. There's a nice story with the Fiordland one. This was actually when I was working in South Australia. It landed up in South Australia. We looked after it for a couple of weeks and then released it. It was fine, but obviously swam over from New Zealand to have a look in South Australia. And as I said, we helped it recover, and away it went back. And funny enough, a few of you have heard about this story. And if you had the Falklands paper yesterday, you'll have seen the story about the Snares penguin, a New Zealand penguin that arrived 8 days ago in the Falklands. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away from where we were, but it is actually on that main island, and it seems to be doing very well, but it made the headlines of the paper. But when you think that it had to swim all the way from New Zealand to the Falklands, it's an amazing journey, really. Humboldt penguin. We do get a chance to see these. Any penguin we see on the last day of our cruise in the water will be a Humboldt penguin. They, again, look a bit like the Magellanic. The white around the eye, or just above the eye, is actually much narrower. It's like a little line. And of course, they all live in the Humboldt Current up South America. So we won't see them until we get... There's Chiloé Island there, and as we come out and head up to Valparaiso, that's our one chance we can see them. And in fact, the day before in Chiloé, they have mixed. So we have to look at them both in the water. And if you remember watching penguins, the way they jump out of the water and are already gone, unless they put the head up, we don't know whether they're Magellanic or Humboldt. Jackass, you can see here, here's your Magellanic, the ones we were looking at yesterday. Nice big white on the head here, and the Humboldt much less white on the head. There is subtle changes on the face pattern, as you can see there as well. And these are the South African ones, which again, quite similar. Magellanic penguin, and obviously you all enjoyed those yesterday. And of course we will not see those now until we come back out and go up into South America. And then of course we get a chance to see them obviously as we go around the fjords and up in places like Otway at Punta Arenas. They have lots of Magellanic penguins as well. There's a young one here, as you can see. Magellanics lay 2 eggs, incubation 40 days. I'm going to go through the penguins that you're likely to see a little bit like this. And what I've done is I've developed a year chart for 3 years because of the king penguins, which we'll get to in a minute. But what I'm going to point out to you is not so much worried about the number of eggs, except obviously the king and the emperor lay 1, but it's the fledging time. This is very important when you are further south because your summer's so short. So basically what happens is, you can see, we'll just do the year 1 for the Magellanic. They lay their eggs October, November. You have chicks from the rest of the year and into this early spring, obviously. But the fledging takes 9 to 17 weeks depending on the conditions and seasoning. And the adults, and you remember what I said about fledging, from the day it hatches to the day that it actually leaves fully feathered. That's the fledging period. And then they molt. The adults molt after breeding. So then they go out, fatten up for that 3 weeks, come back, change their feathers and go off for the winter. Here's the rookery of Magellanic actually in the Beagle Channel near Ushuaia. And this is just to make sure anybody who's asleep wakes up. Some of you will have heard this yesterday. Can you hear the bill clapping? Beautiful. This is a first year. It's not in full proper plumage, as you can see. And it is plumage. It has got feathers, even though they're really strange looking feathers. Here's a young one with the adult. This is a first year bird, and this of course is the adult Magellanic. Right, we'll have a look at the distribution of northern penguins, and as you can see, right round, basically all around the Antarctic continent. And we're looking at king, macaroni, and rockhopper penguins. So they're all basically in the islands around. And last time I was on the stage talking about the Antarctic and the convergence, I mispronounced Macquarie. I used an Irish name for an Irish island, which is quite funny. But the Macquarie Island, as you can see, has rockhopper and also kings there. So also you've got all these other islands right round the outside of the Antarctic continent. King penguin lays 1 egg. Incubation is quite long, 54, and you can see they're laying their eggs in November, December, right through to April, May. Now the reason that they cannot, basically they have such a long fledging period, they can't raise 1 chick in 1 year. King penguins are totally different to the others. So you can see they can fledge anything from 50 to 56 weeks. That's even after the incubation. So it's a long time. Because of that long time, the adults molt before breeding. They need to be in good condition to breed. It's extremely difficult otherwise. So basically they are the only ones that have this odd pattern, and this is how they deal with the breeding cycle, because of the length of it. And as you know, we're getting to emperors in a minute, totally different ball game. So they molt before breeding, and then they have the chicks in very long period of fledging before they leave, and that means that adults can only produce a chick every alternate year. Here's your king penguins. This one's actually brooding a stone. The instinct to brood is extremely strong, as you can see. The one on the right here is melanistic. It's black. It's got too much black plumage. That's why it's black. Looks very smart, of course. And this is, in fact, a different colour mistake, inverted commas. This is called leucistic. And you get that in lots of crows and things like that when you see birds that have white with bits of black in like that. So he's got most of his good plumage. It can't be albino, because albino would have no colour. So albino would have pink eyes and have no colour on it at all. And this is just another term, leucistic. But as you can see, the kings here, beautiful. Lots of you saw those yesterday. You are rather spoilt if you go to South Georgia. You go to a place like St Andrews Bay, and there's 100,000 pairs nesting. Now, quite apart from the din, The smell! Just amazing. And these chicks, they get bigger and bolder and bigger and bolder. I don't know if any of you saw any of the big chicks yesterday, but basically the parents give up on them, get out, and then they start losing weight, change into their proper feathers, and away they go. But they make a nice sound as well. Now multiply that by 100,000. This is in fact the proper egg being brooded. You can see it's on the legs, on the feet, and they protect the egg. They don't have a nest at all. And this is the tender moment when in fact they've had their pairing again, because obviously they pair and bond with each other, and they're just about to transfer the egg from one to the other. Very gently, without touching the ground. They still do the same as the emperor penguins. Macaroni penguin. This is the penguin that we could see outside right now. No, don't go out, just wait for the end of the lecture. But basically they're the ones that are more oceanic or more out pelagic than any of the other penguins. Again, lay 2 eggs, quite a long incubation as you can see. All the laying is in November. Fledging isn't too bad, 10 weeks, and then molt, of course, after breeding. Beautiful penguins though. And here I want to mention about stealing rocks, because basically all these penguins, they lay their eggs on stones. It's very, very important to lay them on stones, especially when you're in Antarctica. They cannot lay onto snow because it's too cold. And what they do is they find the first clear areas, build a nest with stones, lay their eggs on the stones, and that lets air through underneath. So then they can obviously brood the eggs. So stones are extremely important in their nest and in their display purposes. I've been ahead of myself in one sense, but basically there was an experiment done at a rookery of penguins where they painted every single stone in one nest, and by the end of the breeding season there was a coloured stone in every single nest in the whole of the rookery, because they steal them like mad. And in fact, if you know anything, any of you have read The Worst Journey in the World by Apsley Cherry Garrard. Apsley Cherry Garrard did The Worst Journey in the World. He went and collected eggs from Cape Crozier in Scott's party, a story for another time. But basically, when he got married, he gave his wife a real stone. Now, I know most of you probably gave your wife or partner a rather nice, pretty-looking stone. They call them diamonds. Well, there's not much difference, really, when you think about it. And obviously, Apsley was being a little bit conservative, but he gave his wife a real, genuine stone, probably an Antarctic one as well. So here's your macaroni with the lovely haircut, as you can see, and obviously that came from the Italian macaronis. A nice sound. You'll listen to other penguins and then you'll hear this ba-ba-ba-bum, which is the macaroni. What's interesting is if you've got a couple of 100,000 penguins calling, like the chin straps there making a lot of noise, you actually will see, inverted commas, the odd one much easier by the sounds they make. They tell you that they're there, so you listen for the odd sound, and then you'll look and find things like macaroni penguins or something else, because all these penguins will visit different rookeries as they go along. Rockhopper penguin, I know some of you saw these yesterday. I think they're very endearing little things. They have a strange strategy. Lay 2 eggs, A egg, always smaller than the B egg. Egg hatches after B, and most are lost. Again, September, October, November for laying the eggs. Quite a short fledging, but they're not a very big penguin. So 10 weeks from hatching to when they fledge, and then of course the adults leave for breeding. Here we are, and this one's interesting. You can see he's got this is an ecstatic display. I'll play you the ecstatic display in just a second. These ones are young ones here, young rockhopper penguins. As you can admit, that's quite a nice haircut. And they make a really nice noise as well. It's a nice noise if you're a penguin. They are rather fun though. Okay, on to the southern penguins. So these are the ones that basically are on or around the continent. You can see this. That's the emperor, the Adelie, the chinstrap, and the gentoo. And we must be honest, the chances of seeing an emperor are very remote. I mean, we could. If we're going to see one, it'll be on a piece of ice, because they're always on fast ice. but they never go to land really, and that would be probably because he's molting or something. But basically we're not in the right place to see emperor penguins. But Adelie, chinstrap and gentoo, and as you can see basically they're all around the continent. They nest all around the continents, and some of the sub-Antarctic islands. Here's the emperor, and everybody knows all about these because of March of the Penguins. This amazing one egg laid by and the male incubating for 64 days. That's how they get round the strategy of being able to breed every year. So fledging is only 21.5 weeks. It's bigger than king penguin, but it lays, of course, its egg in the middle of the winter. This fledging period, female comes back with that first very important food in the early spring, and then the adults, of course, molt after breeding and they head on back out to sea. Fantastic animals, if you like. These, you see these in shops. They are just like they're just like that. I've actually seen dolls. You know the dolls that look so like this. They're just so soft. The emperor penguin chicks are literally just as soft. They're amazing. I've actually handled only dead ones in museums, but you just can't believe they look exactly like the ones that you buy in a shop. They're incredible. And the noise they make, which I'm going to play you can hear it miles away, over the ships and everything. It's what has just the right tone to echo over ice. And it's one of those strange sounds, not necessarily particularly loud, but it can hear it a long way because of its tone. Fantastic, fantastic birds, they really are. Adelie penguins nest further south than any other penguin. Lay 2 eggs, incubation again 35 days. The interesting thing about these, don't worry so much about, it's okay, laying in October, November, but fledging very short, because of course the further south you go, the shorter the summer. So by the middle of February they've got to have their chicks ready fledged and get them out, because otherwise it starts shutting down. So in another week, 10 days, those bases that are further south that Dave's been talking about, those bases are already considering sending their members back home because the summers are just so short. And of course the Adelies are doing exactly the same. It has to be a very short breeding season because they basically nest so far south. So molt again after breeding. And here's your lovely white and black. This is the penguins. Very interesting. Cape Adare, which is at the entrance to the Ross Sea, they did very recently a PhD was done on the breeding biology of Adelies. How am I going to do this nicely? Basically, when he was doing his study on breeding penguins, their sexual habits are totally amazing. You find it very difficult to actually describe it from a stage, what and who they're at and with. But I can tell you this, it was amazing because when this chap actually did his PhD and started writing up, he obviously had to research back in all the papers about breeding. And he suddenly found that this breeding biology of the Adelie penguins was actually studied and fully documented by the Scott expedition back in 1910, 1911 by one of the scientists there who went to Cape Adare and studied it. But the scientist who did it and did this work was so embarrassed he knew the Victorians would not be able to cope with how and what they do. So he wrote his paper up in Greek, and they've only just found it now. Quite incredible. There's your black penguins. But Adelies are super little birds. Here's the ecstatic display again, and you can see these chicks, lovely little things hanging around here. This is what they sound like. Really funny little penguins, they are. And you can see here, these are ones that are hot. You see they're facing the wind to try and cool down. Here's one with its wings out, its feet out. Absolutely, its fur up. It's just trying to cool down. It really is. This is really one of the fun things you can watch with these penguins, because as the chicks hatch, when they get big enough, both adults have to go out and get food. When they come back, the chicks land up chasing the adults. And basically you can get 15, 20 chicks all chasing the adult that comes out of the water. But you find that the chicks that are owned by the particular adult will always hang on the longest, and then the adults turn and feed them. Basically what they're being fed on is a krill sandwich. If you look at that closely, you can see the eyes of the krill that have been picked up in it. But that's what they look for. Of course, penguins are clean creatures. They will not pick up the sandwich off the ground. If it drops on the ground, it'll be eaten by the snowy sheathbills I was talking to about the other day. So they will only feed literally the chick with the food, and if it drops it, it's wasted. Very attractive. This is an adult, as you can see here, with the black bib. This is a first-year bird, so a non-breeding bird that you can see is in full plumage, with the tail, the nice stiff tail that they have here, but basically without the black underneath there. Chin straps. And what's interesting about these are one of the most noisiest of penguins, and also they're some of the most aggressive of penguins. They can really be very aggressive. Laying November, December. You can see chicks obviously hatching in December right through to sort of January, end of February. Fledging's quite short. They're not that big a penguin. 8 weeks to fledge, and then of course molting after breeding. And as you can see there, 2, very occasionally 3 eggs are laid. And the ecstatic display, well, they're noisy, I told you they were. Get 500,000 of those calling, I can tell you it's noisy. And you can see this aggression. They're always fighting each other and displaying against each other. And they don't take a blind bit of notice. Now I'm going to show you also these Adelie here. They have a particular note, and what's interesting, I'm going to play you the note, but what's interesting is that all the penguins, so Gen 2s would recognise it, they all have this warning note when danger's appearing. And of course I mentioned about skewers attacking them. I'll show you the skewer in a second. But of course this penguin's trying to protect its 2 chicks that are standing up, and they make a different sound, not like that chatter you heard just now. And obviously what happens is the skewer comes in here, another one is distracted. This is why I was talking about feather tracks. This is actually a melanistic chin strap, but you can see actually has a white face. That's all that's left of this little fella. This is how they should look. There's the white, and you can see the chin strap. In fact, in Russia, they call those Russian penguins, policeman's penguins, sorry, because of the chin strap. So, very interesting, but you can see straight away this one's got something wrong. And it was the first time I saw a different reaction, because I've seen melanistic, and I've seen the leucistic I showed you earlier, and I've seen the brown penguins, and the other penguins show no difference in it at all. But this poor fellow was shunned when he came up into the rookery, and just walked around and eventually disappeared. He wasn't at all welcome in the rookery. It was very unfortunate, poor devil. And yet he looks so smart, doesn't he? It's a nice black shirt. It looks fantastic. Here's a young one. I think they just look great. But as you can see, this chin strap, definitely very distinctive. Looks exactly like a chin strap on a policeman's helmet, really. Gen 2s. These are lovely birds. We're going to see plenty of these. Lay 2 eggs, occasionally 3. A little bit longer. Bear in mind they're the 3rd largest penguin. A little bit longer incubation. And you can see also here, laying. This is April, May, June, July, August. And then you can see there is a dividing line, not so easy to see from the back, where some lay October, November. Basically, the ones that are laying further north lay earlier. But if you're in the Antarctic, they can't lay until October or November. And the problem for these Gen 2s, bear in mind they're the 3rd largest, is this period. It takes 15 weeks to fledge. So you've got to lay early to get away with getting these chicks away before the winter comes back in. So very interesting, these Gen 2s, because this fledging period is so long. So they're doing very well. We'll see them almost to their complete limit as far south as they can go. And they are limited. They can't really breed much further south, but literally because of this fledging period here. And then, of course, the adults, again, molting after breeding. Here they are. Here's the usual stone stealing going on and presentation. I always call this a tender moment. You can see how they breed, basically. This is the brood patch, and of course they lay the egg on that and the small chicks and turn the egg on regularly and keep it warm on the brood patch here. This penguin is very, very hot. You can see that. It's got its wings out, its feet out. It's even panting because, again, it's a nice day for us, all right, having a look. But basically they like it to be cooler. And this is ecstatic display here, which sounds like this. Rather nice, actually. I love that sound, I really do. And just to show you sort of how they progress, this is hatching on 1 day old. You can see the hole in the egg here, brood patch just at the back. This is the 1 day old chick, it's still got the egg tooth here. You can see the egg tooth just coming out through the egg as the first day old chick hatches. I had the chance of going back to the same site for a few visits, so you could see it when I went back 9 days later. Nice big happy chicks, nice egg tooth is still there. This one's been fed with probably a krill or a fishy sandwich, very nice. When they're 17 days old, they're getting bolder, as you can see. They still have the egg tooth, but they can virtually be left. 25 days old, they'll be in the creche. But obviously I hung around for a few hours and eventually managed to catch the 2 chicks, which are nice and big. They've lost the egg tooth, nice and large. And then I managed to get one of the 2 chicks at 33 days old. And it took me about 5 hours before he came back to the nesting site and I was able to do it. And look, it's even displaying to the chick. It's giving it a stone, which is really quite interesting. And of course you get strange things going on. This was some sort of strange death in the family, if you like. This poor chick has died. But penguins really are quite, how should we put it, not that intelligent. And I was watching one nest one day and it had 2 chicks in it and everything seemed fine. But one of the chicks, it was small now, rolled out of the nest. It got onto the edge and then actually rolled out of the edge. And the adult got really very concerned about it. So it went round and looked at the chick and it prodded it a few times. The chicks didn't know what to do and the adult didn't know what to do. And then it rolled in the wrong direction and rolled away a bit. And after about an hour and a half, bear in mind I wasn't going to be hit by walking sticks for visitors or anything else, but after about an hour and a half, the adult just gave up and just walked away. Couldn't even work out how to pick it up and put it back in the nest. So it just shows you, they have to stay in the right place. The adult knew there was something wrong, but just couldn't work it out. So their intelligence isn't the greatest, I'm afraid. You don't want to be under penguins as well. There's penguins nesting up here. So you can imagine, this is why you've got to go and try and find those lovely penguin photographs. But you can, as you can see, they make a lot of mess. And all this pinkish stuff, of course, is krill. And if you're in a nest that's exposed and out, you can just see how well they can scatter their guano, if you like. Absolutely amazing, really. And obviously this is partly self-defense mechanism. If you're out swimming in water, you don't want to find something coming back towards you. So they have a really great ability to get rid of excreta. Natural predators, well, of course the leopard seal is one of the big ones. Killer whales are another one. Skuas, of course, they will certainly deal with chicks and sick adults. If they see a sick adult, they won't leave it alone. You find that the other penguins will come in and defend all right, but and they're well able. The penguins are well able to defend themselves and defend the family, but the skuas don't hesitate on anything that's slightly sick. And of course the giant petrels can be absolutely brutal and eat chicks alive if they're not careful. So the adults have really got to watch their nesting young or they'll lose them. You're going to see this. This is on an ice floe. Well, actually, you can just see it's on land, but it's the same applies when it's on an ice floe. What happens is they all build up. These are Adelie penguins building up on the side, and eventually one gets kicked into the water. Everything's nice and calm, no problem. They all jump into the water afterwards. If there's a leopard seal around, they wait a while. Watch, obviously, see the poor devil disappear. But they wait a while, and then they kick another one into the water and wait and see what happens. And this is obviously what does happen, unfortunately for the few, when the leopard seal gets it. I mean, it obviously is brutal, to say the least. And that's, as you can see, the result. Introduced predators, obviously sub-Antarctic islands, basically, not on the Antarctic. Rats and cats have an effect on penguins like other seabirds, unfortunately, and sub-Antarctic islands have a major problem in particular with rats, but some of the islands even have cats on it. And there are other risks, as you can see here. I know this has got a band on it, all right, but you can actually see this one's got a spike through it. It's been stabbed on a piece of wire. Oil pollution is a nightmare, as you can imagine. This is a Gen 2, and this is a Gen 2 covered in oil. This is a South African penguin that was covered. It should look like this. And obviously when there is oil as that, basically they've ingested too much and they will die anyhow. There were experiments done on seabirds in Ireland where 1,000 from one of these disasters, 1,000 were banded and put back in the water, and basically within 2 years everyone came back dead. So it's almost a publicity stunt to try and clean them. If they're that sick, usually they've ingested too much oil. We have to try, but most of the time it doesn't work. A Tasmanian initiative on slightly oiled birds worked very well. And basically what they did is they put out an appeal when they were cleaning the penguins for jumpers. Because, of course, when you've cleaned all the oil out, they've got to let the oil come back naturally. It takes a couple of weeks. So they asked people to knit these little jumpers. There's your penguin, and there's the jumper on the penguin. But it did work. It worked very well. But again, it's only the slightly oiled birds that are going to survive. And one of the interesting things is we know penguins live to 20 to 25 years, but there has been a problem with rings or bands on them, which has actually affected quite a few populations. So we don't know at the back end of how long. They've obviously had to re-look at the whole aspect of banding and ringing and what you do. Time depth recorders laid flat on the back of a penguin work very well, but banding can actually have an effect, and that's not what you want to do when you're trying to do something like that. Why do you band them? Basically, it is the true way to monitor change in survival and emigration rates. And if you're doing a study on penguins or any other bird, it's so important when you're looking at it to look at the emigration rates, the breeding success, the survival of the young, and the survival of the adults. Then you'll get a population size. And I have seen so many times where people are actually doing studies on birds and they lock on to one problem, the breeding success or the survival of the young. You have to look at the whole to get the full picture, basically, on these bird populations. Status of some penguin species, you can see here, most of these are in trouble. King penguin is stable. Emperor, Gentoo, Adelie are near threatened. You can see there the emperors have come onto the near threatened in 2012. Chinstraps, stable. Rockhopper, snares, Fiordland, vulnerable. Erect crested, endangered. Macaroni and royal, vulnerable. Yellow-eyed, endangered. Little blues, stable. African, endangered. Magellanic, near threatened. It's not a pretty picture really, and we just have to keep on hoping for our penguins and try and protect things. Now, the last thing I want to do before I go, many of you went to Dave's talk yesterday, and he was on about the Antarctic Circle and basically the Antarctic legal restrictions coming into force at 60 degrees south. Here's your 60 degrees south, basically well into the Antarctic convergence, which we've crossed today. And you can see, okay, the biological Antarctic Circle is out here, but from 60 degrees onwards, we really do have to be very careful. And offenders are liable to prosecution, there's no doubt about it. So I ask and appeal to all of you just to remember, no food outside. And it's no food. You can drink, but no food outside. And if you do take something like paper cups out, just bear in mind they can blow. Also, the lids of these cups, do be aware that they can come off as well. There is no smoking on any of the outside decks. Now, we have places inside, but just bear that in mind. Obviously, again, pollution is one of the worries, and basically it's no smoking out on the decks outside. And this is an old favourite, and it happens so often. It's so easy, and no one wants to do it at all, but it comes out with your gloves, the old tissue. It comes out with the gloves so often, so just bear it in mind. Please bear it in mind. Big reason, of course, is that you do not feed wildlife, and it is legal quite apart from being dangerous. I took this photograph of a skua attacking a member on the back of the deck of one particular cruise liner because it had been obviously fed before and was demanding its food, and becomes very dangerous. These things can really hurt you indeed. Enduring Gentoo welcomes to Antarctica Zaandam visitors. Thank you very much.